In the subdued glow of the warm light, Grand Duke Raphael sat at a table, his head resting thoughtfully in his hand, his expression serene and quiet. Duoneo, observing him from a distance, murmured to himself that it appeared another long night stretched before the Grand Duke. Whispers of a past conversation echoing from the darkness had previously filled the room. One voice had lamented that with the commander-in-chief injured and provisions dwindling, any further advance was impossible, and the assassination plot against Maid remained merely a desperate expectation. Another had doubted the feasibility of such an act, questioning who would willingly undertake such a perilous role. A third had offered a more pragmatic suggestion to at least attempt to divert Maid's attention, whether to secure much-needed supplies or to arrange for urgent medical care. A sudden, unexpected noise pierced the tense silence, causing every head to turn abruptly towards its origin, their collective attention instantly captivated. Grand Duke Raphael stepped into the space, his presence commanding, and immediately challenged the absurdity of any assassination plan. He firmly declared his complete unwillingness to drive any of his subordinates into a deadly predicament of his own volition. The success rate of such a venture was inherently low, and he would not make a gamble where the chances of winning were virtually non-existent. At that pivotal moment, Andert made his entrance, remarking with an air of surprise that Grand Duke Raphael was still among the living, having half expected to see a corpse emerge instead. He then added that the restorative effects of the herb of mercy were undeniably potent. Drawing nearer, Andert then asserted that a genuine chance of victory remained, provided he was the one to undertake the mission. Grand Duke Raphael's composure shattered instantly. He seized Andert by the collar, his anger flaring as he roared his name, emphatically declaring that he would never sanction such an act, and that this was a direct order. Grand Duke Raphael continued, insisting that Andert must remain by his side until the conclusion of the ongoing war. In response, Andert merely offered a bright smile, his demeanor calm and unperturbed despite the intense tension that crackled between them. Then, mysteriously, Andert's form began to slowly dissolve into the very air, fading away before Grand Duke Raphael's disbelieving eyes. Grand Duke Raphael awoke with a sudden jolt, his heart pounding, as Ducher's voice broke through the remnants of his dream, inquiring if he was all right. Releasing a ragged breath, Grand Duke Raphael questioned the reason for Ducher's presence at such an unusual hour. Ducher, noting the Grand Duke's troubled complexion, asked if he had been plagued by that recurring dream once more. Grand Duke Raphael brushed off the concern, stating he was fine, and redirected the conversation to Ducher's business. Ducher reported that an urgent dispatch had arrived from the capital, accompanied by rumors that the emperor had held a closed-door discussion with 5 prominent nobles concerning the northern conquest. Grand Duke Raphael, his mind sharp despite the recent dream, immediately inquired if this pertained to the valuable mines within the northern Deus mountain range. Duoneo confirmed his suspicion, adding that he had been informed of the emperor's intention to propose Grand Duke Raphael as the vanguard for the campaign. A wry remark escaped Grand Duke Raphael's lips, suggesting that the emperor must truly be anxious if he felt compelled to push him to the front lines. He then asked if there were any other pertinent reports. Ducher proceeded to mention a report from approximately a month prior, detailing the discovery of a survivor on Queen Island. Her name was Bertie Luchon, described as being around 170 centimeters in height with a slender build. He then paused, adding with a hint of gravity that the dispatch carrying this news had been ambushed twice already, making this delivery the 3rd precarious attempt. Grand Duke Raphael, sensing something amiss, questioned whether there were any peculiar circumstances that would warrant such repeated attacks. Ducher replied that the woman was said to have settled in midwintry and was currently employed as a maid. Her physical resemblance to Sir Andert was noted, a detail that caused Grand Duke Raphael's expression to sharpen considerably. He clenched his hand tightly, his knuckles turning pale as he dismissed the notion, stating firmly that she must merely be a look-alike. Dutcher, adjusting his glasses, then added a significant piece of information. Andert's older sister, his only blood relative, had also tragically perished during the Queen Island incident. Grand Duke Raphael, visibly disturbed, ordered Duoneo to summarily dismiss such unreliable news at his discretion. Duoneo bowed in acknowledgement, confirming he would carry out the command. Elsewhere, Daisy stood with impeccable posture, clad in her maid uniform, her stance resolute as she gazed straight ahead. Her thoughts drifted to the eye of Dain Kek, then to a fleeting wish that it had been an egg, before correcting herself to consider the Viscount. At this rate, secretly acquiring the artifact seemed to be her only viable option. A faint sense of relief washed over her, knowing that such a powerful item was within her reach. Daisy pondered if all the other artifacts might also be weapons. She mused on the stark contrast between large-scale offensive magic and healing magic, recognizing that their fundamental opposition could completely shatter and then reassemble a body. The dream of extending one's lifespan, she concluded, was indeed a long and arduous pursuit. Lu then entered, a bright smile on his face, inquiring what Daisy was so lost in thought about, before playfully suggesting they go out somewhere. After a while, Lu led Daisy to an unfamiliar location. Daisy, curious, asked where they were. Lu simply replied that they should step inside first. As they entered, a staff member approached them with a polite smile, extending a warm welcome to them as esteemed customers. Daisy, still bewildered, questioned the purpose of their visit. Lu explained that it was all in preparation for a successful debutante ball. Daisy immediately expressed her concern about the cost, stating she had no money. Lu, however, dismissed her worries, confidently declaring his own wealth. He recounted how the head maid had graciously granted permission for this outing, knowing he would be covering all expenses. Lu then proceeded to meticulously list his requirements for the staff member: dresses and suits for the ball and banquet, 2 sets of everyday clothes, a spring coat, 2 sets each of hats and gloves, and then, almost as an afterthought, 2 sets of pajamas, 4 sets each of socks and undergarments, and even attire suitable for tea parties. He specified a fortnight as the deadline, gesturing calmly towards the increasingly overwhelmed staff member while Daisy stood stiffly beside him. The staff member offered an apologetic smile, explaining that due to the sheer volume of the order, even a fortnight would prove a considerable challenge. Lu, undeterred, added a crucial detail: these garments were intended for the Viscount and Viscountess Weatherwoods, causing the staff member to gasp audibly in shock. The manager, sensing a significant opportunity, immediately appeared, her excitement palpable. She exclaimed that if the reclusive Viscount and Viscountess Weatherwoods were indeed to wear their creations, then the task absolutely had to be entrusted to her. It was an unparalleled opportunity, a true gold mine. She eagerly offered to visit the mansion personally to take their measurements. Lu, however, maintained his calm smile, gently placing his hand against Daisy's cheek as she stood rigid and uncomfortable beside him. He smoothly explained that the Viscountess was currently preoccupied, and thus had requested the use of this companion, who shared a similar height and skin tone, as a model. Daisy, frowning in confusion as his hand still lingered on her face, swiftly grabbed Lu's arm and, pulling him in a hurry, dragged him out of the establishment, much to the surprise of the onlookers. Daisy then pressed Lu against a nearby wall, her hand braced beside his head as she effectively cornered him, a sharp glare in her eyes. She quietly reminded him that he had claimed to be the Viscountess, then pointedly asked why he was having the clothes adjusted to her own size. Lu softly replied that utilizing transformation magic was considerably easier when working with a model as a baseline. He revealed his original intention had been to transform Miss Daisy to perfectly fit his own physique, and then inquired if she found that prospect disagreeable. Daisy averted her gaze, her thoughts drifting to the idea that, if transformation was the method, Andert's physique would undoubtedly be far more comfortable. She vocalized her dislike for the idea, stating that he was too big in many ways. Lu, intrigued, leaned in closer to Daisy and provocatively asked for clarification on where exactly he was deemed big. Daisy, her irritation mounting, simply frowned and muttered to forget it. She then described her preferred physique, a height of 180 centimeters, well-developed arm muscles, and a slender waist. Lu, seemingly delighted, smiled brightly and expressed mock surprise that she harbored a preference for such a short and stubby body, adding that Miss Daisy's aesthetic sense was truly incomprehensible. As the two of them eventually stepped back into the shop, the manager, ever eager, asked if they were ready. The manager then inquired if she should tailor the Viscount's attire to a male physique, mirroring the adjustments made for the Viscountess's garments. The staff member, observing the interaction, felt a subtle difference in the atmosphere but wondered if it was merely her imagination. The manager, ever enthusiastic, invited them to follow her, proclaiming she would take their measurements, and then exclaimed in amazement at how wonderfully shaped everyone was. With effusive praise, the manager suggested a soft silk dress for the Viscountess, one that would beautifully accentuate her silhouette. Alternatively, she proposed a bolder, shoulder-exposing style, noting it as a popular trend. Throughout this, Daisy stood rigidly, trying on the various outfits. The manager then turned her attention to Lu, exclaiming in awe as she admired him, seemingly overwhelmed by how striking the Viscount appeared in each ensemble. Her eyes sparkled with genuine emotion as she clasped her hands, declaring his appearance truly remarkable. The manager concluded that the two of them made a perfect pair, while Lu stood elegantly beside Daisy, who remained stiff and utterly unamused. After some time, Daisy left the shop, her displeasure evident, muttering under her breath that she would honestly prefer to be cleaning. She had no idea that the process of getting dressed could be such an utterly exhausting ordeal. At that precise moment, Daisy's attention was drawn to a nearby ice cream shop, instantly captivating her. Lu, noticing her gaze, pointed towards the shop and suggested they indulge in some ice cream, offering to treat her. Daisy, however, glared at him, suspiciously asking if he harbored yet another ulterior motive. Lu, with a knowing smile, replied that carrots and sticks always went hand in hand, and then provocatively questioned why else one would offer a dog a treat during its training. Daisy, in disbelief, wondered if he was subtly calling her a dog. Lu then calmly instructed her to wait patiently under a nearby tree now that their arrangement was settled. Reflecting on her surroundings, Daisy realized she had never been in this particular area before. She glanced at a sign and recognized it as Midwintry National Peace Park, prompting her to wonder if it was a cemetery honoring the Allied forces. She then remembered Lu's instruction to wait patiently. Suddenly a voice echoed within Daisy's mind, calling out to her, causing her to freeze in surprise. The voice echoed again, insistently asking where she was looking. Daisy turned towards the park gate, a strange sense of unease creeping over her. She slowly stepped forward, her movements cautious and deliberate as she approached the entrance. Reaching out, she gently pushed the gate open. Inside lay a cemetery, rows of gravestones stretching quietly beneath the ancient trees, a solemn silence pervading the air. The sight of the cemetery inexplicably triggered vivid memories of the past, flames spreading across a chaotic battlefield, figures collapsing one after another in a horrifying tableau. A voice suddenly shouted at her within the memory, urging her to snap out of it. A man grabbed Andert's leg, desperately pleading that there were too many enemies and they had to surrender, evacuating the residence immediately. Andert knelt, lifting the man, telling him not to speak nonsense and to quickly take his hand. Andert then fiercely shouted at him to stop talking nonsense, instructing him to tell him everything himself once the war was over. Lu's figure abruptly materialized within the fading memory, declaring that no, Daisy, the war was indeed over. At that moment Daisy, still in Andert's form within the vision, cried out, asking if he could not see the demons on the ridge, and commanded him to stop standing around and help move the wounded. Lu gently interjected, stating there were no wounded here, and no demon legion. Lu urged her that it was time to return to reality, as Daisy held the bloodied man in her arms within the rapidly crumbling memory. Trembling, Daisy asked if he was serious, if it was truly all over. Lu affirmed that yes, no one else had to die. Right now, he added, the only thing dying was the ice cream he was holding for her. The soft glow of magic emanated from behind Daisy as Lu approached, his presence a comforting anchor in her fading consciousness. He gently whispered that it was time to go home, and as if on cue, Daisy slowly succumbed to slumber, collapsing gracefully into his arms. She rested quietly against him, her form small and vulnerable as he held her close. A while later, Daisy slowly awoke, her eyes fluttering open to the silent confines of a bed. Disoriented, she gazed around, a profound confusion clouding her mind. She wondered where she was and what had transpired. From nearby, Lu's voice cut through the haze, calm and measured, informing her that water was within reach. Hearing his familiar tone, Daisy sat up, a wave of relief washing over her that his presence was not merely a figment of her dream. Yet, a disquieting thought lingered. Had her senses been so dulled that she could no longer distinguish reality from hallucination? She offered Lu a heartfelt thank you, declaring that he had saved her life. A faint smile played on Lu's lips as he responded, remarking that he was sure the melted ice cream would have appreciated hearing that as well. Daisy, recalling her earlier craving, questioned if he had discarded it, lamenting that she should have just eaten it. Lu explained with a hint of playfulness that while he would have liked to, he had a certain someone to carry home. Daisy inwardly chided him for laying it on thick, yet she found herself unable to counter his point, a quiet blush creeping onto her cheeks. Her curiosity piqued. Daisy then inquired if he had been nursing her the entire time. Lu clarified that the task had fallen to the servants, not him. Daisy, ever astute, pressed further, asking if by servants he implied the notorious butler assassin. Lu's expression held a knowing glint as he affirmed her suspicion, adding that he, along with the rest of the trouble she had dumped on him, had managed the situation. He further revealed that he had already informed the head maid of Daisy's delayed return, concocting a rather imaginative excuse. Miss Daisy buried someone again and needed some special training. Daisy inwardly groaned, exasperated by the sheer audacity of his fabrication, of all the excuses he could have conjured. Shifting her focus, Daisy asked Lu if his journey to Weatherwoods was for a deck artifact and whether he intended to steal it. Lu, ever evasive, reminded her that he had promised to reveal such details only when the flowers bloomed. Daisy, admitting her curiosity, pointed out that he was far from ordinary, hinting at the depth of his mysterious nature. Lu then leaned closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper, acknowledging her desperation to know. His words, however, carried an underlying warning. She should not fall for him, for she would only end up getting hurt. Daisy, frustrated by his peculiar statements, demanded to know when he would cease uttering such insane things. Lu's reply was tinged with a philosophical resignation, suggesting it would likely be around the time Miss Daisy gave up on him, especially if she frequently encountered experiences akin to today's. Daisy confessed that it had been her first hallucination, though she admitted to having suffered from nightmares for the past few days. Lu, his tone softening with concern, asked if any recent painful event had triggered these disturbing phenomena. Daisy's only response was a quiet hum, a soft sound of internal struggle. He gently probed further, inquiring if anything pleasant had occurred that might offer even a moment of respite from her troubles. Still, Daisy offered no verbal answer, merely humming softly once more. Lu sighed, a profound weariness in his voice, observing that poor Miss Daisy did not seem to have any answers at all. Daisy, defending her reticence, insisted that nothing particularly noteworthy had happened. Lu, however, saw deeper, asserting that she simply hadn't realized it yet, and proposed a little reconnaissance. With a tender gesture, he placed his hand on Daisy's head, instructing her to close her eyes. He bid her to delve deep within herself, to ask, "Who are you?" Daisy's thoughts raced, identifying herself as Daisy Fagger, recalling her past life as Andert Fagger, and even further back as the woman known only as the past. She pondered whether a person could truly be defined by a name alone, believing instead that a name was meant to hold affection, to become a vessel binding feelings, and fostering a quiet sense of responsibility towards one's own existence. She recounted how she had chosen the name Day, a name so common it could be found anywhere in the empire. It was a shield, a shroud for her true identity, ensuring that even if she resided somewhere for 3 years, she would leave no trace behind. Surprisingly, she had genuinely enjoyed her maid's position under this half-hearted pseudonym, finding satisfaction in simply dusting and scrubbing windows until they gleamed. There was comfort in knowing she could be a part of society without the constant burden of slaying demons, embracing the peaceful life of Daisy. It was a quiet existence she had consciously chosen over her former life as Andert. Yet, despite her new path, the nightmares and hallucinations persistently returned. The crushing sense of loss and helplessness from when she had lost her comrades as Andert still lingered within her, intertwined with the dark thrill of crushing evil underfoot. That intoxicating rush of liberation, which always made her head spin, refused to fade. She realized she never truly wished to erase the 14 years she had lived as Andert. Despite her resolve to live as Daisy, a part of her saw herself as nothing more than a hypocritical low-life maid. Yet, a quiet question echoed within her. Did she truly feel no affection for Daisy? A soft voice, seemingly from outside her thoughts, interjected, asking if Daisy had chosen that particular flower. The woman's voice described the flower as perfect for spring, its beauty undeniable as she handed it to Daisy. Daisy had replied that she simply liked it because its name was beautiful. She now understood that she had planted a daisy, a simple flower that quietly reflected the name she had chosen for herself. It wasn't that Daisy lacked affection, rather. The me who chose to live as Andert still remained within her, and the me who was Daisy also existed, standing quietly within that life. Every single moment, every experience layered one on top of the other, weaving together the lives of both Andert and Daisy within her. All of it, every fragment, every choice belonged to Daisy alone. The Daisy of tomorrow, she realized, would become even more truly herself than she was today. With this profound understanding, Daisy finally grasped who she truly was. She suddenly awoke from the dream, her eyes wide, the lingering warmth of this powerful realization still clinging to her. Her soul, once fragile and on the verge of shattering, now felt steady and firm. Turning to Lu, confusion etched on her face. Daisy asked how such a thing was possible. Lu, observing her with a gentle gaze, inquired if this was her first experience of the unity of mind and body. Daisy repeated the phrase, still bewildered. Lu explained it simply as the process of ascending toward the divine, though he added that Daisy was still only taking her very first small steps. Daisy wondered if he meant concepts like Maisto or Dian Kek, figures of great spiritual power. She then looked at Lu, asking why he was staring at her so intently. Lu remarked that Daisy was quite a high-level swordsman, then questioned if her master had never taught her about the unity of mind and body. Daisy replied that if she had to name a master, then everything she had encountered on the battlefield had been her teacher. She then paused, her eyes narrowing as she asked how Lu knew she was a swordsman. Lu laughed lightly, a secret glimmer in his eyes, and explained that it was a secret he cherished. He admitted his fondness for Daisy's surprised expression and a desire to tease her further, but he abruptly stopped mid-sentence as the sun began to rise. Moments later, the headmaid's voice echoed through the air, warning Daisy that if she was late even one more time, her pay would be docked. The head maid also announced that starting that very day she would conduct noble etiquette lessons during Daisy's noon break. A few days later, Daisy found herself contemplating the bitter truth that self-reflection was a luxury reserved for the working class. Despite this, the head maid unexpectedly praised Daisy's transformation magic, declaring it an absolutely beautiful and flawless job, even if it wasn't considered high-tier magic. Daisy inwardly agreed, acknowledging that her elegant blonde hair and blue eyes suited the disguise perfectly. Observing her clean, soft hands free of any calluses, she turned to Lu, complimenting him on his impressive skill in transforming her exactly as she desired. The head maid further affirmed that Daisy looked every bit the part of a dashing head of the Weatherwoods family. Daisy, however, maintained a humble perspective, stating that even disguised as the former lord's nephew, she remained a mere servant on the verge of a pay cut. The head maid countered, remarking that for someone in such a precarious position, Daisy carried herself with remarkable confidence. Daisy, embracing the compliment, declared herself the definition of bold. The head maid, while agreeing that boldness was good, still urged caution. Daisy, stepping closer to her, dismissed her worries, insisting that the die was already cast. She continued, adding that if any problems arose, Lu would handle them as always. Mid-sentence, however, she was suddenly struck on the head. Frowning, Daisy turned back in irritation, seeking out the culprit. There stood Lu, perfectly disguised as Morian, his appearance now that of the beautiful wife of Viscount Weatherwoods. Daisy was momentarily stunned, her mind struggling to reconcile this exquisite form with Lu. She quickly corrected herself, reminding herself not to be fooled. It was just Lu. Lu, in his new guise, sternly informed Daisy that for the time being she was his woman, and warned her against flirting. Daisy immediately challenged him, questioning if that truly meant she was his. Lu responded with a soft smile, clearly amused by her reaction. He leaned in close, a teasing glint in his eyes, and playfully told her to take a good feel, asking if she didn't feel a bit empty down there. Daisy fell silent, her gaze dropping as Lu suggested, her expression stiffening in awkward realization. Lu, his smile unwavering, then clarified that at that moment he was neither woman nor man, meaning he could charm both. He leaned in even closer, his tone soft but laced with teasing intent, telling Daisy to be twice as careful. Daisy mused that the name Morian Sedin suited Lu all too well. The identity Lu had personally chosen to assume as the wife of Viscount Weatherwoods was Morian Serenia, the fourth daughter of a count from the northern continental allied Holy State. Initially the head maid had objected, believing they should not steal a noble identity, but her admiration for the pair was evident as she gazed at Daisy and Lu together. Lu, with a characteristic dismissiveness that often accompanied his reluctance to engage in lengthy debate, settled the matter with another oath. Daisy, observing his familiar pattern, noted that whenever he was too lazy to argue, he simply resorted to swearing an oath. A short while later, their arrangements concluded. Daisy and Lu boarded the waiting carriage together. From behind, the head maid watched them depart, bowing her head in a gesture of deep respect and heartfelt prayer. She wished for their safe return, free from major troubles, and implored them to take good care of the esteemed Weatherwoods family. Daisy, hearing her words, turned slightly and inquired if Lu had heard the head maid's earnest plea. Lu, with a soft smile playing on his lips, gently corrected her, reminding her to address him as Morian, my love. He then delicately took Daisy's hand, declaring with a theatrical flourish that they were destined to become the most passionately in love newlyweds the world had ever witnessed. With a gentle lurch, the carriage began to move, rolling forward along the road as Daisy and Lu embarked on their journey. Inside the rattling carriage, Daisy called out to Lu, but he turned back, a subtle reprimand in his gaze, once more reminding her of the proper address. Correcting herself, Daisy referred to him as Morian and then posed a question. Lu, however, immediately refused to answer, playfully demanding that if she wished to ask, she must first kneel and utter the phrase, "Please tell me, master." With a reluctant sigh, Daisy complied, kneeling before him and speaking the requested words. Lu, his playful mood satisfied, relented and asked what she wished to know. Daisy then delved into a complex inquiry, explaining that when someone ascended to demigod status, their body underwent significant transformations, and all illnesses and scars vanished. She then asked if this transformative healing also extended to the soul. Daisy's thoughts raced, recalling her own reduced lifespan of 3 years, not only due to her physical death, but also because Mephisto's potent magic had been powerful enough to crack even her soul. If becoming a demigod could indeed heal her soul, then the arduous search for the Duoneo relic would be rendered unnecessary. A faint, teasing smile graced Lu's features as he remarked upon Daisy's grand aspirations. He playfully questioned if she truly believed she could become a demigod, pointing out that her mind-body unity had been an accidental achievement and doubting if the next stage would prove just as effortless. He then firmly advised Daisy to abandon such false hopes and to prepare herself for the task ahead if she merely wished to live out her remaining lifespan as the luckiest maid in the world without much effort. It was, he declared, time to work. Lu promptly instructed a servant to ensure the assigned job was properly executed. The servant responded with a respectful "Yes, ma'am," confirming Daisy's suspicion that Lu was in fact orchestrating everything behind the scenes. Daisy lifted her head, her mind drifting back in time. It had been 9 years since Regal, the day Natasha, the greatest mage of the Allied forces, had been appointed as the crown princess of the Penro Empire after the war. Her coronation had been a quiet, modest affair. Natasha had approached Andert, asking what gift she would bestow upon her to celebrate her new title as crown princess. Andert, with characteristic confidence, replied that as long as it wasn't as difficult as plucking a star from the sky, she would fulfill the request. To Andert's surprise, Natasha had suddenly asked her to marry her, vowing to dedicate her entire life to protecting her. Daisy remembered this moment, recognizing it as the day the crown princess had passionately proposed to a commoner in front of an astounded public. A faint smile touched Daisy's lips as she recalled Natasha, acknowledging her as a truly interesting person. She wondered what Natasha was doing now. Lu reached out, gently took Daisy's hand and leaned in, his voice a soft murmur as he asked what she was pondering so deeply. Daisy offered a faint smile, dismissing his query with a quiet, "Nothing, really." Lu, however, narrowed his eyes, playfully branding her a liar. He asserted that she had been thinking about a woman, then issued a light-hearted but firm warning. Lu threatened that if Daisy dared to try anything funny, he would cut off even what she did not have. Daisy could only inwardly sweat, a sudden awkward thought striking her. Was this what married life was truly like? A while later, they arrived at the bustling high-speed airship boarding station. Their striking appearance immediately drew the attention of nearby onlookers, turning heads as Daisy and Lu disembarked. A staff member approached, offering a polite welcome to Viscount Weatherwoods and his lady before courteously guiding them to follow him. He informed them that their luggage would be moved to their room separately, and that a banquet was already underway, inquiring if he should escort them directly. With a soft click, the staff member slowly opened a grand door, announcing the arrival of Viscount Weatherwoods and his lady. As Daisy and Lu stepped inside together, a hush fell over the assembled crowd, quickly followed by whispers. People speculated about Viscount Weatherwoods, a figure rarely seen in public, and openly admired the beautiful woman accompanying him. Daisy, feeling the weight of their scrutiny, murmured that they were attracting too much attention. Lu, however, simply replied that she should cease complaining when she possessed such a beautiful wife. He then instructed Daisy to go and engage with the people, just as the headmaid had instructed, reminding her to commit all their names to memory. Daisy froze, a wave of panic washing over her as she realized with dread that she remembered absolutely nothing from those lessons. At that critical moment, a voice suddenly boomed, commanding them to stop. Count Roosevelt stepped forward, his gaze piercing as he questioned if Daisy was truly Viscount Weatherwoods. Daisy's body tensed. She recognized Count Roosevelt as the father-in-law of the former Viscount Weatherwoods, but more significantly, he was a comrade who had once fought alongside her on the battlefield. Though his hair now bore streaks of gray, his eyes held the same sharp intensity she remembered. Lou, ever vigilant, subtly pressed against Daisy's arm with his fan, a silent reminder that as the Viscount she was expected to greet him. Daisy stepped forward, offering a formal greeting to Count Roosevelt, stating that she had heard stories of his exploits from her aunt since she was young. Count Roosevelt inquired if Andert had indeed spoken of him. Daisy, maintaining her facade, replied that to her he was like a hero. Clearing his throat, Count Roosevelt then asked about the lady beside Daisy. Lou gracefully introduced himself as Morian Serenia, expressing his honor at meeting a great general of the Allied forces. Count Roosevelt acknowledged the pleasure but questioned the name said. Lou smoothly explained that he hailed from the kingdom of Ostroza and that his biological father was Count Said. Count Roosevelt then remarked that as a noble from the Northern Continental United Church, Lou had traveled quite a distance. Lou, with a dazzling smile, declared that for his beloved husband, he would even go so far as to call him father. Count Roosevelt paused, surprise flickering across his face at the unexpected use of husband. Daisy, observing the discomfort that subtly clouded Count Roosevelt's expression, realized she had overlooked something crucial. The kind yet formidable man before her was known for his unwavering adherence to strict discipline, a veteran who executed training with absolute precision, leaving no room for error. Even with his closest comrades, Count Roosevelt had been unyielding, quick to punish even a minor infraction like failing to salute. He was, she recalled, a rigid old-school disciplinarian, enforcing exhausting routines in strict order without exception. As the nephew of the son-in-law, who had not only swallowed up his daughter's fortune but also failed to properly greet him or even inform him of the marriage, it was entirely understandable why Count Roosevelt was displeased. Daisy offered an apology, stating there had been circumstances, while internally acknowledging the validity of his feelings, though she knew she was not the real Viscount. Count Roosevelt, after a moment, remarked that it was fortunate the Weatherwoods family line had not been severed, but cautioned that not everyone would understand Viscount Weatherwood's unusual situation, urging her to be careful. Daisy expressed her gratitude for Count Roosevelt's advice. She noticed he did not seem overtly hostile and, encouraged, asked Lou if they should try speaking to more people. Lou, however, suggested they return to their room, asserting that others would eventually seek them out on their own. A while later, a couple approached and greeted Daisy, expressing their honor at meeting Viscount Weatherwoods. Then a man arrived, apologizing for his sudden appearance and stating his sincere desire to meet the Viscount. Soon after, another woman called out to Viscount Weatherwoods, and before long a growing crowd gathered around Daisy and Lou. After enduring many such encounters, Daisy felt utterly exhausted. Her body finally gave in to the overwhelming fatigue, and she collapsed onto the bed. She mused that this new life was a constant struggle, a continuous procession of countless people coming and going. She announced her intention to take a short nap and asked to be woken before the banquet. Daisy glanced at Lou, inwardly deciding to leave the rest to him, hoping to enjoy a peaceful respite. As the airship glided through the sky, Daisy drifted into sleep, a faint, uneasy question lingering in her mind. Why did her arms suddenly feel so heavy? After an indeterminate amount of time had passed, Daisy slowly opened her eyes. Her gaze drifted towards the window, wondering if morning had already arrived. As she turned her head, she was startled to find Lou lying close beside her, his golden eyes glinting softly as he leaned even closer. "Honey, are you awake?" he purred. Daisy jolted upright, a loud scream escaping her lips. Lu frowned slightly, chiding Daisy to cease making such a fuss, reminding her that it broke the immersion of their elaborate act. He warned that if she continued in this manner, she would ruin everything. A dangerously sweet smile then spread across his face as he declared he would throw Daisy off the airship if she persisted. Flustered, Daisy insisted they should sleep in separate beds. Lu tilted his head, feigning innocence, and asked why, reminding her they were newlyweds. Daisy panicked, shouting that their situation was merely a disguise. Lu let out a soft laugh, addressing her as his dear Miss Daisy, and teased her for being embarrassed and stuttering like an idiot once more. He looked at Daisy with that faint, annoying smile, observing that it was vexing when she made such a face while in a man's appearance. He added that he would restrain himself since she was his beloved Viscount. Lu leaned closer, his breath a warm whisper against her ear, and told Daisy to simply hurry up and get ready. He then handed her something, instructing her to check today's schedule as well. Daisy hesitated for a moment, a slight blush rising to her cheeks as she acknowledged the unconventional nature of her current predicament. With a furrowed brow, she scanned the schedule Lu had provided, a look of confusion deepening on her face. She mumbled to herself, observing that it appeared to consist entirely of just playing and eating. Lu, ever serene, calmly explained that this seemingly leisurely itinerary constituted the daily routine of a true noble, a meticulous expenditure of time and effort dedicated to cultivating and solidifying crucial relationships within their elevated circles. Accepting his explanation, Daisy stepped down from the bed, a renewed sense of purpose taking root. If this was the expectation, she mused, then she could not afford to remain idle. Adjusting her gloves with a decisive tug, Daisy inquired if Lu intended to depart immediately. He confirmed his plans, stating he had certain matters to investigate. It seemed the shadowy client who had dispatched assassins to the Weatherwoods family had connections to the nobles' assembly. Daisy noted the curious cessation of assassin visits since their attendance at the assembly had been announced. She pondered whether this meant they no longer needed to send intermediaries, perhaps now able to confront their targets in person. Lu's eyes lit up with pleasant surprise. He praised Daisy's astuteness, affectionately calling her honey, and leaned in gently, placing a soft, lingering kiss on her cheek. With a tender smile, he explained that this gesture was his way of wishing her a safe journey. Lu began to utter that he would rest a bit more, and reiterated his wishes for her safe trip. But Daisy, her face now a profound shade of crimson, had already rushed off before he could finish his sentence. "That crazy bastard!" she fumed inwardly, storming away in a state of mortified embarrassment. The image of his lips on another woman's chin, even a fabricated one, had absolutely nothing to do with their mission, she fiercely convinced herself. Upon her arrival at the designated area, Daisy found two young men already waiting for her. They introduced themselves, Igashi, whose father ran a newspaper company, and Vulquin, whose father was a bank manager. Daisy greeted them, attempting to recall their names. "Ah, yes, Equin and Vulfin. Nice to meet you." Igashi, however, politely corrected her. "It is Igashi and Vulquin." Daisy, flustered, apologized and then charmingly mispronounced their names again as Eggsy and Vulguin. She then proposed that they dispense with formalities and speak casually, explaining that the formal address made her feel unnecessarily nervous. Vulquin hesitated, a touch of apprehension in his voice, and clarified that they were merely of the upper class, not true nobles. Daisy, seemingly oblivious to the social nuance, then inquired about the lively commotion downstairs, sensing that something interesting was unfolding. Igashi's face brightened at the mention of the noise. "It must be that time already," he exclaimed, asking if Daisy would like to join them to watch. Daisy, a playful glint in her eye, told them they were talking too much and should try again. Nervously, both Igashi and Vulquin rephrased their invitation, asking if she would accompany them. A short while later, downstairs, Vulquin gazed around in awe, exclaiming, "Wow, look at all these people!" He added that they couldn't possibly miss the famous Buckley-Grayton succession battle, a grand event known throughout the land. Daisy's expression immediately turned serious. The name Buckley-Grayton resonated deeply within her memory. She recalled that the dukes of the Buckley-Grayton family served as the empire's guardians, protecting the royal family, and that the strongest individual always rose to become the head of the lineage. The condition for leadership was based solely on skill, transcending bloodline, age, or gender. However, even the most outstanding contenders required the acknowledgement of both the previous head and the emperor. Among the current candidates, the Grand Duke was none other than the legendary sword saint, Gehark Buckley-Grayton. Daisy's eyes narrowed slightly in recognition. "It is that person," she thought, a faint flicker of understanding crossing her features. Suddenly the crowd surged with excitement. Igashi and Volquin, caught by surprise, pointed towards a flash of long silver hair, recognizing the figure. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. "It's Jin Buckley-Grayton, the second in line for succession." Another voice added, "Her opponent is Oster, the fifth in line." Jin moved first, a blur of motion, clashing blades with Oster as both lunged forward simultaneously. Daisy watched intently, a faint smile playing on her lips. "He is quite good," she mused, observing Oster's skill. "To possess that level of sword aura at such a young age makes him a genius." Jin, however, remained laser-focused, her gaze unyielding, her eyes locked onto the fight with unwavering concentration. Oster struggled to keep pace, barely managing to block each relentless strike from Jin. Daisy's perception sharpened. "That look in her eyes is different," she realized. Jin was a sword demon, someone bewitched by the blade, living and dying for its call. Though such individuals were often deemed mad, they were honest fighters, never resorting to dishonorable tactics. In a fleeting memory, Daisy recalled a past conversation with the butler, inquiring if Jin was the head of the assassination guild she once belonged to, Clone. The butler had calmly responded that if Jin were to die, Clone would inevitably crumble, and the Grim Reapers targeting her would vanish. However, an assassination at the nobles' assembly would be an arduous and risky endeavor. Instead, he suggested stripping her of her rights of succession. Daisy raised a thoughtful hand to her chin, pondering why someone like Jean, seemingly lacking nothing, would choose to run an assassination guild. She wondered how she could possibly strip Jin of her succession rights. A sudden, urgent voice from the crowd shattered her thoughts, urging the fighters to hurry up and attack. Daisy frowned, questioning what she had just heard. Her gaze sharpened, carefully observing the sword Jin wielded. The voice echoed again. "Isn't it a shame to end it like this?" Daisy was startled, a chilling thought crossing her mind. Is the sword talking? The fight reached its dramatic conclusion as Jin delivered a swift, decisive blow, striking Oster down in a single masterful move. Daisy was shaken internally. "Don't tell me," she thought, a profound realization dawning on her. Jin might have reached the first stage of mind-body unification and could, astonishingly, hear the voice of her sword. At that precise moment, Jin's gaze shifted, locking directly onto Daisy. Jin spoke calmly, offering an apology for interrupting their first meeting. She then walked towards Daisy, introducing herself as Jin Buckley-Grayton, and politely asked if Daisy could spare her a moment of her time. Jin's blue eyes, calm yet firm, held Daisy's gaze, repeating her request for a brief audience. Daisy felt a surge of awkwardness. She instinctively ran a hand through her hair, thinking to herself that in such situations, a smooth evasion was paramount. She apologized, stating firmly that she was already a married man. The two young men, Igashi and Volquin, stared in shock, their expressions stiff with disbelief at Daisy's unexpected declaration. Daisy, maintaining her composure, calmly added that she would pray Jin found a better match elsewhere, addressing her as Lady Jin Buckley-Grayton. A moment later, Daisy stood there, a composed smile on her face, internally commending her reasonably gentlemanly rejection. The other man, having witnessed the exchange, glanced at her and playfully teased that after dropping such a bombshell, she still managed to maintain her composure. Daisy, with a faint smile, then challenged him, asking if he was about to propose because he had fallen for her face. The man laughed heartily, assuring her there was no chance. The brown-haired man, Igashi, spoke lightly, observing that while some other young ladies might be eager to marry, Jin was different. He continued, stating that woman was famous for caring about nothing but her sword. Daisy inwardly agreed. His assessment was not inaccurate. Earlier, Jin had indeed worn the intense gaze of someone eager for a duel, which only deepened Daisy's suspicions about her. According to the butler's intel, Jin was the master of clones. It was already peculiar for a sword demon to manage an assassin's guild, but to so blatantly approach her target while under such scrutiny was truly baffling. The dark-haired man, Vulcan, looked at Daisy and asked Gray what was on his mind. Daisy offered a faint smile, admitting she had just had an interesting thought. From that day forward, Daisy diligently spent her afternoons socializing with Igashi and Vulcan, all the while quietly observing everything around her. In the evenings, she retreated to her cabin, enjoying card games and passing the hours in quiet companionship with Lou. However, Daisy was certainly not idle. She meticulously organized the intelligence she had gathered into 3 distinct files. One of her key conclusions was that Jin could never ascend to become the Duchess of the Buckley-Grayton family. Daisy noted that within the family records, there was a formidable individual Jaewon had never once managed to defeat, a genius known only as Gash. Daisy also considered that Igashi had studied abroad in the Northern Continental Union, the very region where the Serenite family was based. Perhaps, through Igashi's connections, she could uncover the true reason why Lou had chosen to assume the identity of Morian Serenia. Back in the present, Daisy posed a question to Igashi and Vulcan, asking if they had ever heard of the relic of Dion Kaith. She observed Igashi's expression intently, noting a flicker of recognition as if he knew something. She smiled, adding playfully that her wife had a particular fondness for treasure stories. The brown-haired man, Igashi, warned Gray that if he were him, he would abandon that idea immediately. The blond man, Vulcan, added that there had been recent rumors of high-ranking figures actively seeking that very relic. High-ranking figures, huh? Daisy mused to herself, a sense of vindication settling over her. Just as she had suspected, her client might actually be present on this very airship. Given her subtle probing and conspicuous presence, whether it was GYN or the mysterious client, it was only a matter of time before they initiated a confrontation. Daisy sat calmly at the table, a picture of serene composure. She quietly observed the growing crowd gathering behind her, a wave of confusion spreading through their ranks. A woman urged her companion to be a man and just go for it. Another voice chimed in, "Viscount, if he didn't think he could pull it off with that hand." One man declared his bet was on the Viscount winning, while another protested, claiming he had been about to place his bet on the same outcome. The brown-haired man Igashi looked at Daisy with genuine concern, asking if she was all right. Daisy turned to him, a faint smile playing on her lips. She remarked that things had been quite intense since morning, expressing bewilderment as to why everyone was suddenly sticking to her like glue. Daisy continued, her tone light and playful, suggesting that perhaps her handsome face was the cause of all the commotion. The brown-haired man, calling her Gray, simply shook his head, stating that she truly had no talent for jokes. Daisy, a flicker of confusion crossing her features, turned her attention back to the men. The dark-haired man, Igashi, offered his assistance, inquiring if Jaggery was prepared. Jaggery confirmed his readiness, declaring that it was high time to provide Gray with some much-needed perspective. As if on cue, the stage lights flared, signaling the commencement of an event titled Yersi Crash. Jaggery gestured towards a complex chart, elucidating his point. "Gray, you must realize that the Black Regal airship within these walls carries only nobles and high society types." he continued. "Among them are nobles who possess less wealth than the common elite, and conversely, there are socialites who wield far more power than any lord." He then held up a deck of cards, explaining that if Daisy wished to delve deeper into this intricate social tapestry, it all came down to a fundamental question. He laid down the cards, asking simply if Daisy had fought in the magic war, a question Daisy met with unwavering silence. Jaggery then revealed the next card, posing another probing question. Was Daisy a loyalist, staunchly supporting the Emperor, or a Xenialist, aligning with Archduke Raphael? He elaborated. Your chosen faction ultimately dictates your family's prestige, erecting an insurmountable wall between everyone. He concluded by asking where Daisy, in this complex social matrix, truly fit in. She admitted, with a hint of irony, that her position was, to say the least, ambiguous. Precisely, Jaggery affirmed. He fought in the war, but received no spoils. Igashi then dramatically revealed the Joker card, signifying Daisy's enigmatic status. With zero outside activity, no one knows if he's a loyalist or a Xenialist. To compound her predicament, she was openly mingling with non-noble socialites, showing no reservedness whatsoever. Daisy inwardly acknowledged that without intending to, she had inadvertently created the perfect bait situation. Yet, it would all be for naught if neither Jen nor the mysterious client took the bait. Suddenly, a subtle stiffness crept into Daisy's posture, an unexpected presence catching her off guard and causing her to flinch almost imperceptibly. Duke Jihark Buckley had materialized behind her, his voice a low, resonant murmur. He observed that she seemed to be holding a rather good hand, inquiring if she was the type who savored playing the game with extreme caution. Daisy managed a faint smile, her composure remarkably calm despite the sudden, palpable tension in the air. A part of her, she admitted to herself, had harbored a premonition that this encounter was inevitable, ever since the butler had first uttered the name Buckley Grayton. Duke Jihark Buckley greeted Daisy with polite formality, stating that it was a pleasure to meet her before introducing himself as Duke Jihark Buckley Grayton. Daisy, with a decisive slam of her hand on the table, stood to her full height and introduced herself as Grey Weatherwood. In her mind, he was more than just a duke. He was another master who had once taught her the sword, a comrade with whom she had crossed the perilous lines of life and death on countless battlefields. As Daisy shook hands with Duke Jihark Buckley, a profound sense of recognition washed over her. She had always known deep down that a reunion with him was a possibility, an eventuality that had now come to pass. Duke Jihark Buckley, a towering figure known as the Sword Saint, exuded an aura of unmatched strength and authority. There was a time when Daisy had been his student, alongside other masters, learning the intricate dance of the blade. Those memories, etched with the intensity of shared peril and the preciousness of camaraderie forged in the crucible of war, were too vivid to deny. With a heartfelt sincerity, Daisy declared her gladness at their reunion, even if it had transpired under such unexpected circumstances. Duke Jihark Buckley then turned to Daisy, asking if she could spare him a moment of her time. Daisy agreed with a faint smile, then inquired if it would be inconvenient to speak there, in the midst of the bustling assembly. She knew, with the keen intuition of a seasoned warrior, that the Sword Saint, the only sword master she truly knew, possessed depths she could not easily fathom. With her current skills, it was perfectly normal that she could not decipher his inner thoughts, yet she could distinctly feel a single veiled trace of bloodlust hidden within his highly refined gaze. Duke Jihark Buckley, however, simply smiled, assuring her that it was no trouble at all. He then revealed the true purpose of his approach. Jin wished to engage in a mock duel with Daisy. Daisy's thoughts raced. Now she understood why the sword fiend was the head of clone. Duke Jihark Buckley, known as the Emperor Sword, stood at the pinnacle of power, Yet a treaty with the imperial family prevented him from maintaining any private army under his direct command. However, since Jin was not yet the duke, he could easily manipulate her into serving as a puppet leader. Daisy's instinct screamed that he was the true client, the mastermind behind Clone. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that this was perhaps the worst possible hand she could have been dealt. Before she could react, Jaggery quickly interjected, apologizing and stating that there seemed to have been a misunderstanding.
"Gray is not a swordsman,"
he asserted, grabbing Daisy's hand and holding it up to reveal her soft, uncalloused skin. Daisy remained silent, observing the unfolding drama. Duke Jihark Buckley regarded Daisy with a faint smile, asking if she too would claim that a duel was impossible because she was not a swordsman. Daisy, with a quiet confidence that bordered on satisfaction, responded with a radiant smile. With a confident flourish, Daisy raised 2 fingers, stating that if he met 2 specific conditions, she would graciously accept his request for a duel. Her first condition was that the mock duel would be held exclusively between the 2 of them, with no spectators allowed. Her second, and perhaps most audacious, condition was that if Jin were to lose, she would forfeit her rights of succession. Daisy calmly explained her reasoning. She wished to spare either of them the humiliation of public defeat, and if she, a mere novice, were to somehow lose, she could not bear to see such an unqualified heir ascend to the duke's position. The 2 young men, Igashi and Volquin, froze in stunned disbelief, their expressions rigid as Daisy's words left them utterly speechless. Duke Jihark Buckley then addressed Jiwin directly, inquiring if she would accept Viscount Weatherwood's betting conditions. Jin, with an unwavering firmness, declared her acceptance, stating that the Viscount's demands were reasonable, and she would adhere to the agreed-upon terms. The next day, Daisy dedicated herself to rigorous sword training, a poignant reminder that as a man, she could never afford to let her guard down. As Daisy trained, she suddenly heard a voice calling out, "Viscount Weatherwoods!" She turned towards the sound to see Duke Jihark Buckley approaching with a faint smile. He explained that since this was a sudden duel, she likely did not have a sword, and graciously offered to lend her one. Daisy accepted the weapon, offering a simple thank you. Duke Jihark Buckley continued to regard Daisy with a faint smile, then inquired if they had met somewhere before. Daisy, maintaining her serene demeanor, lightly dismissed the notion, insisting that this was indeed their first encounter. Daisy, however, was filled with suspicion. What kind of scheme was he attempting to pull by lending her his sword? For some inexplicable reason, the gesture felt profoundly shady. She resolved that it would be best not to use this particular sword. With a calm smile, Daisy spoke, "Let's keep this simple." She then outlined her final condition. If Jin could force Daisy to draw the sword, Jin would win. She further clarified that if Jin made her draw the sword and swing it even twice, Daisy would concede defeat. Jin, her determination ablaze, declared her approach. She vowed to eliminate any enemy, regardless of their identity, and assured the Viscount that she would not refuse his goodwill. With a fierce lunge, Jin launched herself forward, her blade clashing against Daisy's with a burst of sparks. Daisy thought to herself, "Wow," she was glaring at her like she wanted to kill her. A loud metallic clang echoed through the air as their blades collided violently. In an instant, Jin's blade was knocked from her hand, clattering to the ground as she stared in utter shock. Daisy, seizing the moment, rushed forward and struck Jin. She knew, with the muscle memory of countless battles, that she had blocked the Sword Saint's strikes dozens, even hundreds of times, making Jin's attacks feel almost rudimentary in comparison. Jin froze in shock, her eyes wide with disbelief as she failed to react in time. She dropped to her knees in defeat. Daisy looked down at her, her voice calm and measured. "Next time, it would be both of your ankles," she stated. She continued, a faint smile touching her lips. "After that, your wrists." Daisy added, almost conversationally, that if Jin were to be hit like that, she would be bedridden without crutches and unable to even hold a fountain pen for an entire month. Jin, in a rare display of humility, admitted her defeat, stating that she had lost and would relinquish her position as heir as promised. Daisy inwardly celebrated. With this, the butler assassin's request had been resolved, at least for the time being. Jin then asked if she could pose one question. Daisy, with a magnanimous air, replied that she could ask two. Jin, ever the sword fanatic, asked how Daisy had managed to achieve such a level of skill at her age. Daisy mused that she truly was a fanatic who loved the sword, a trait she didn't particularly dislike. She considered for a fleeting moment swinging her own sword once and offering a lesson. Instead, Daisy crouched down in front of Jin, her voice quiet and steady. She told Jin calmly that it was a level she could not achieve, explaining that she had grown stronger faster than others through unusual experiences and was now paying the price for it. Jin, her curiosity piqued, asked about this mysterious price. Daisy, with a light-hearted tone, replied that it was a secret. She inwardly acknowledged that she couldn't exactly tell Jin she had died once and returned to life. Jin, however, was undeterred, asking with newfound determination if there was any chance, then, that Daisy would take her in as a disciple. A while later, Daisy returned to her room, a faint, amused laugh escaping her lips. It was a bold request, she thought. How could she possibly take the Sword Saint's daughter as a disciple? She decided she would simply spend the remainder of her time hanging out with Lu. Daisy paused, an awkward silence filling the room. A small, uncertain sound escaped her lips as her expression stiffened. Lu, in a dazzling display, suddenly appeared, his voice teasing as he asked if she was late. Daisy was caught off guard, her mind reeling, wondering what kind of situation this new appearance had brought forth.